All right, just breaking, the market turning lower, just a couple points lower right now, amid news that North Korea is one step closer to becoming a full-fledged nuclear power. This news coming to us from the Washington Post. The rogue nation has successfully produced a miniature nuclear warhead that can fit inside its missiles. Fox News military analyst General Jack Keane joins me now with more. And General, I'd start by asking you, what does this mean? Help me interpret the Washington Post headline for all of us. What does it mean to our country?
Well, first of all, let's accept the fact that it's true. We don't know that for a fact, but it's likely true, and it's likely, obviously our administration is very much aware of this. They've had this knowledge for some time, and it was on the table in their discussions with the Chinese and Russians about the economic sanctions that they were just able to successfully get through the UN, so credit to them. But what it means is North Korea has made another step towards nuclearizing ICBMs capable of reaching the United States. The Chinese and the North Koreans, I believe, have always made the same calculation based on historical fact, that if they nuclearize ICBMs, putting American people at risk, the United States would never conduct regime change in North Korea, and the United States would also, and this is important to understand, accept that reality. In other words, they would acquiesce to that capability, just as the United States acquiesced to North Korea having nuclear capability, and just as they acquiesced to China, Trish, having ICBMs in the 1960s after they acquired atomic bombs. We protested loudly about the Chinese having that capability, and we eventually acquiesced. They have both made the calculation that's what's going to happen here. Not war, but the United States will accept this reality, and it's based on the behavior, I believe, of the Obama administration in appeasing and accommodating the Iranians and their policy of strategic patience with the North Koreans. I think that has always been the elephant in the room here.
Okay, so it's a different administration. Do you think we're going to accept that reality now?
I think they're coming to the reality that they cannot, and that is one of the reasons why China signed up for the sanctions. But the sanctions, though comprehensive, though better than anything we've done before, still permits North Korea to have a decent economy because their clothing and textile industry is not touched. China is still going to sell oil to North Korea. That's the reality of what's taking place there. We're still not there, I believe, in actually capturing China to the point where they will force North Korea to stand down. We are not there yet.
General, I'm with you on the sanctions. You know, great. I'm glad that China and Russia signed up, but I would point out that $1 billion, when you're talking about and it's a small economy, right? Nothing like ours, but it's a $28 billion roughly estimated economy, so $1 billion isn't that big a hit. Not to mention, as you say, you got to actually count on the Chinese to enforce the sanctions, and Lord knows that hasn't worked so well in the past. So, you know, I think it will put in a whole lot of hope into these sanctions. Well, meanwhile, we got a real severe reality going on. And I'm curious to get your perspective on this. I've heard from some that we're, what, a year and a half out from them being able to actually really hit us.
Well, I think that's likely the case. Listen, I don't know for a fact because I don't talk to intel guys about anything like this. I don't want to have that kind of information. So I'm reading newspapers just like you are and listening to Fox where you get the best information. But the fact is, yes, let's assume they do have a miniaturized nuclear capability, and let's assume they tested it and they know it works. They still have to get an ICBM to re-enter the Earth's atmosphere successfully. They have not demonstrated that capability. The last one burned up. They also have to be able to hit a target successfully. They wouldn't risk sending an ICBM to the United States with a nuclear warhead without the confidence that it's going to hit what they're shooting at. And they also know, listen, because they're paying attention to our capability more than Americans do, obviously. We can obliterate North Korea just using our submarine force alone, much less our own arsenal of ICBMs.
Would it come to that?
It would come to that if they attacked the United States. That's exactly what would happen, just as if Russia or China attacked it.
Democracy should continue on. The country believes that even if the population of the U.S. ceases to exist, the country should go on. Akin to its almost paranoid nature, the U.S. government has a series of defined protocols on how to continue the country when the country is no longer. the continuity of government plans. You probably already know about part of these plans because you probably know about the US president's line of succession. If the president dies, there's a list of 17 people ranging all the way from the vice president down to the Secretary of Homeland Security who would take their place. With such a long list, the chances of the US going without a president are near none. The one time a year when the entire line gathers together, the State of the Union, one individual in the line of succession is appointed designated survivor to wait out in a bunker to run the government if the rest of it dies. But the line of succession is the basic stuff, the stuff people already know. What's far less known is the semi-secret protocols and places the government has spent billions of dollars and decades building. However, until just 60 or 70 years ago, the US felt it was untouchable. At no time in history had an enemy existed as relatively close to the US as during the Cold War. The US's foreign policy always kept in mind that an ocean separated it from its enemies, but with the invention of nuclear bombs, an enemy could go from declaring war on the US to toppling its government in a matter of hours. During these days, the US government began actively preparing for Doomsday. There are 4 main bunkers from which the US government would run the country following a world-ending event. The Presidential Emergency Operations Center, Raven Rock Mountain Complex, Mount Weather Emergency Operations Center, and the Cheyenne Mountain Complex. The president is the most important person to survive Doomsday, both for symbolic and logistical reasons. If a nuclear warhead is inbound to Washington, he or she would most likely evacuate downstairs from the White House into their underground bunker, but that's not guaranteed. During the Truman administration, the president refused to leave the Oval Office during what was believed to be an attack. This ended up being a false alarm, but some presidents have said that they believe that they should write out an attack with the rest of the population. It's just like saying a captain should go down with their ship. The Oval Office, and even the White House bunker, is not the safest place someone can be during an attack. But morale saves lives, and seeing a president braving out the fight can help create a sense of national unity that would keep the country together. A single person is replaceable, but the government as a whole is more delicate. Raven Rock, Pennsylvania would serve as the underground Pentagon. All the leaders of the armed forces would evacuate by helicopter to this facility in the event of an attack and command their troops across the country and the world. During an attack of an apocalyptic scale, it's likely that martial law would be imposed, meaning that the military would take over day-to-day control of the country. The commanders would have wide-ranging, almost dictatorial powers, and habeas corpus would be revoked. From distributing food to serving as law enforcement to keeping the lights on, the armed forces would truly work on the front lines of rebuilding a destroyed country. The Cheyenne Mountain Complex just out of Colorado Springs, Colorado would serve as the home to NORAD, the agency responsible for controlling and tracking the skies above the US and Canada. So, if the above-ground world proved too dangerous for the country's leadership, these 4 underground bunkers would serve as the home to the bare bones of the US government. But what about the rest of it? Nearly 4.5 million people are employed by the US federal government, and they all work to keep it running. Where would the hundreds of government agencies go? Well, nobody knows exactly, at least publicly, but we do know how they would relocate. You might have heard of the DEFCON system. It makes frequent appearances in movies, but few have heard of COGCON. COGCON is a readiness level system that directs agencies how to prepare for the activation of the government's continuity of government plans. At COGCON 4, the lowest level, every US government agency must be able to relocate to an alternate facility and perform basic functions within 12 hours. It's an incredibly ambitious plan. At COGCON 3, this number goes down to 8 hours, then at COGCON 2 is when things get real. At this level, Doomsday is imminent. Every agency has 3 sites for their continuity plan, A, B, and C, and their agency would split into 3 corresponding teams, A, B, and C. The A team would relocate to a secure facility near its normal headquarters, probably bunkers under DC. The B team would relocate near the Mount Weather facility, and the C team would relocate to another undisclosed facility. Each team would be ready to take over operations at a moment's notice. The A team would continue operations for as long as possible, either until they're dead or communications are cut off. Then the B team would seamlessly take over operations. If the B team falls, the C team would serve as the final chance for the survival of the government agency. When the surface of the Earth is unsurvivable, there is one other place to go other than underground, to the sky. The traditional Air Force One has redundancy upon redundancy and most likely dozens of classified defense measures, but there's a different plane from which the president might command the country after Doomsday. The Boeing E-4 Advanced Airborne Command Post. It became increasingly clear to leadership under the Carter administration that the bunkers would do little to protect against a direct nuclear strike. In fact, they would just concentrate the very individuals that the enemy would attack into a few holes in mountains. Surviving a nuclear blast while 7 miles above Earth, however, is far more conceivable. This plane is sometimes referred to as Air Force One when it matters. Whenever the president travels, one of these planes is stationed at most a couple hundred miles away. From this plane, the president can command the country indefinitely. It can be refueled mid-air by tanker, so, barring technical issues, it can remain flying for as long as the food and water lasts. In a doomsday scenario, this plane could literally stay airborne for weeks at a time to keep the country's leadership safe. After Armageddon, the United States' goal would be to rebuild the ailing country with however many survivors remained. But how would the country continue as the same country when most everyone was dead? Because of the line of succession, the president could be an unknown, unelected official with a bare-bones government of just a few thousand people. So what's to say to a survivor in Texas or Oregon or Alaska that it's still the same country continuing on? Well, what binds America together is a common culture and legacy. Art and historical artifacts are the physical representations of this, and their survival would pose a powerful message about the State of the Union. On Doomsday, resources would be scarce and disjointed, so officials have had to make decisions about which items to save and which would be left behind. For example, priority would be given to Leonardo da Vinci's Ginevra da Vinci over Rogier van der Weyden's St. George and the Dragon, and the Declaration of Independence would be saved before the Constitution. Ideally though, all three of the nation's most important documents, the Declaration of Independence, the Constitution, and the Bill of Rights, would be evacuated from Washington. Grouped together, they would be called Freedom Documents Group 1, and while some high-level officials would evacuate Washington by road, these three documents would get their own helicopter straight to Mount Weather to continue the powerful legacy of the United States. Nobody knows exactly how or if the US government will survive Doomsday. All we know are some of the plans. Plans are just plans though, and do not account for the unknown.
North Korea best not make any more threats to the United States. They will be met with fire and fury.
Today, President Trump, in light of these latest developments, made perhaps his strongest comments yet about North Korea, threatening fury and fire if there are more threats from North Korea. I think this just reflects that the tensions on the Korean Peninsula are going to intensify because there's a diplomatic standoff and no really clear way to resolve it. I think the international community is well used to sort of bombastic talk from North Korea. Coming from a US president is something new, and I think we're entering new territory diplomatically, and there's a lot of uncertainty about how it's going to shake out. As with any comments from the US president, it's kind of hard to interpret how seriously we should take it, but he is the most powerful man in the world, so we can't ignore it. And I think we'll find more measured comments from his top cabinet officials and advisors, but at the end of the day it's Trump who's making the decisions, and doubtless Pyongyang is listening very carefully to everything the president says.
The execution of nuclear weapons is responsibility of the President of the United States. Upon receiving the President's direction, the combat crew goes through a set of procedures necessary to validate the message, to authenticate its origin, and then to begin to interact with the weapon system to enable it for the launch sequence, to target it on its directed objectives, and then the launch sequence begins.
Okay, I'm on the missile launch checklist on 3-98.
Agreed.
Step 1, launch key inserted, previously accomplished.
Agreed.
Step 2, targeting or launch option selected. Select from the launch main menu.
Launch.
Click A option selected, 0051.
0051.
Okay, step 5, alignment mode, enter Mike.
Mike.
Step 5 alpha, enter Sierra in the PSYOP BOA field.
Sierra.
Step 6, initiate key pressed.
Initiate.
Minuteman III provides day-to-day deterrent for our country. And so the whole idea is to create, as we did during the Cold War, a political and military circumstance that serves our ultimate national security objective, and that is our survival.
Step 17, all call enabled procedure required.
Agreed.
I'm there on page 3-103, launch menu from main menu selected. Step 1.
Launch.
Enable from launch pop-up menu selected.
Selected.
All call enable from enable pop-up menu selected.
Selected.
Unlock code entered. Juliet, Papa, Papa, November, Kilo, Foxtrot.
I have Juliet, Papa, Papa, November, Kilo, Foxtrot.
That's good. Enable switch, down and lock.
Down and lock.
OID, over to whiskey side.
Whiskey.
Step 6, initiate key pressed.
Initiate. I have successful enable co-op.
I agree. All call enable is accomplished. Moving back to launch checklist.
Agreed.
Step 18 and launch actions at this time. Hands on keys. On my mark. 3, 2, 1. Mark. Hold
I have ELC message transmit.
and release. ELC message transmit. I agree. Step 18 is accomplished. Step 19, launch switch is back to code used.
Okay, we're waiting for LIP.
I agree.
Each combat crew is comprised of a commander and a deputy commander. They are typically company-grade officers, highly trained in this specific operational task and on this weapon system.
We got CES.
They have in their custody, and they have as their responsibility, the unique task of providing operational support, security, and the execution of a nuclear weapon system.
I have positive launch indications Alpha 02 through Alpha 11.